Breaking, explosive, unthinkable. Just when you thought the Jim Jones story was sealed in history, tonight everything changes. New FBI evidence has allegedly surfaced, and if what insiders are claiming is even remotely true, it could rewrite one of the darkest chapters ever recorded. Fans are shocked, experts are stunned, and families connected to the case are reportedly panicking behind closed doors. According to sources close to the investigation, sealed files, hidden recordings, and newly uncovered witness statements are painting a far more sinister picture than anyone ever imagined. For decades, people believed they knew the full story. They were wrong, very wrong. Emotions ran high earlier today as whispers of a possible life sentence began circulating through law enforcement circles, igniting a firestorm online. Comment sections exploded, old allies went silent, former followers are said to be lawyering up. One former insider allegedly broke down in tears during questioning, shouting, "This was never supposed to come out." Another source claims the evidence directly contradicts long-standing official narratives, suggesting manipulation, staged events, and a chilling cover-up that spans generations. The tension is unbearable. The stakes have never been higher. Families tied to the tragedy are reportedly divided, with some demanding justice at any cost, while others insist this investigation will only reopen wounds that never truly healed. Friends are turning on friends. Old loyalties are being questioned. And deep in the background, federal agents are said to be preparing for a legal battle that could shake the system itself. So what exactly did the FBI find? Why now? And if this evidence holds up, who else could be dragged down with him? Stay right here, because what you're about to hear may change everything you thought you knew. The room felt colder than it should have been, even with the lights blazing and cameras rolling, because something had shifted and everyone in that circle of agents, attorneys, and shaken witnesses could feel it. The file dropped onto the metal table with a heavy thud, and when the FBI agent finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, and terrifyingly calm. "This changes everything." Those words echoed far beyond that room, because within hours, whispers turned into panic and panic turned into chaos. Phones started ringing non-stop. Old associates who hadn't spoken in decades suddenly wanted to check in. Fans were shocked as rumors spread that new evidence tied Jim Jones to crimes far more calculated and deliberate than anyone had ever believed. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided before the public even knew what was coming. Behind closed doors, a former Inner Circle member sat hunched over, hands shaking, eyes darting between the agents and the floor. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice cracking. "He planned for this. He always planned for everything." An agent leaned forward. "Planned for what?" The man swallowed hard. "For silence. For fear. For people to keep protecting him, even after death." The room went quiet. That was when the first recording was played. Grainy audio, distorted by time, but unmistakable. Jim Jones' voice filled the room, calm, almost soothing, while discussing contingencies, legal shields, and sacrificial narratives. One attorney slammed her pen down. "This wasn't madness," she said. "This was strategy." Outside that building, the reaction was immediate. Social media erupted. Longtime followers defended him with fury, calling the investigation a disgrace, while others felt betrayed all over again. "We trusted him," one former follower cried during a leaked phone interview. "He told us he was protecting us. Now they're saying he was protecting himself?" Families of victims were dragged back into the nightmare they'd spent years trying to escape. Siblings argued. Parents wept. One sister shouted at her brother, "If this is true, how can you still defend him?" He shot back, "Because admitting it means admitting we were wrong about everything." The FBI evidence didn't stop at recordings. Documents surfaced, allegedly written in Jones' own hand, outlining financial movements, offshore accounts, and coded language referring to the final act as leverage. One investigator whispered to another, "This reads like a criminal mastermind, not a delusional preacher." The tension only escalated when a second witness came forward, this one a former aide who had vanished from public view decades earlier. She stared straight into the camera during questioning and said, "He told us the world would only understand when it was too late." When asked why she stayed silent for so long, her answer sent chills through the room. "Because he told me if I ever spoke, people I loved would pay the price." As news outlets scrambled to verify leaks, legal experts began floating the unthinkable. If Jim Jones were alive today, this evidence could support a life sentence. That phrase alone sent shockwaves through the public. Life in prison. Even the suggestion felt surreal. Talk shows debated it non-stop. One commentator shouted, "History has been lying to us," while another warned, this investigation could collapse under its own weight. But behind the scenes, agents kept digging, and with every hour, the story grew darker. A heated argument broke out between two former followers during a recorded confrontation. "He saved us," one yelled. "He destroyed us," the other fired back, tears streaming down her face. The personal stakes became impossible to ignore. Children of former members were suddenly dragged into the spotlight, forced to answer for choices they never made. "I grew up being told he was a monster," one said quietly, "but my mother still calls him a savior. What am I supposed to believe now?" Emotions ran high as more names surfaced, including people who had built entire careers denying any wrongdoing. One insider reportedly screamed during a phone call, "They promised us this would never resurface," before abruptly hanging up. Late that night, as rain hammered against the windows of a federal office, an agent closed a file and said the words no one expected to hear. "We're not done. Not even close." The implication hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about revisiting the past. It was about exposing a web of manipulation, fear, and betrayal that might still be alive today. And as the first part of this story leaked into the world, one thing became clear to everyone watching. The truth, whatever it was, had been buried for a reason, and someone was terrified it was finally coming out. The morning after the leak felt like an aftershock, the kind that rattles nerves long after the initial quake has passed. News vans lined the streets outside courthouses and family homes, engines humming, cameras waiting, because everyone sensed something bigger was coming. Inside one suburban house, a former devotee sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone, unread messages stacking up. His wife whispered, "Are they saying he knew?" He didn't answer at first. Then he finally said, "They're saying he knew everything." His voice broke, and with that, years of denial cracked open. Federal agents moved fast. Subpoenas went out quietly, targeting banks, storage facilities, and estates connected to people who had once sworn unquestioning loyalty. One agent muttered, "This is like pulling a thread and realizing the whole thing is stitched together." Boxes were retrieved from a long-forgotten warehouse, dusty, mislabeled, intentionally hidden. Inside were ledgers, tapes, and letters. One letter, read aloud during a closed briefing, made the room go silent. "History is written by those who survive," it said. "Make sure we survive in memory, no matter the cost." Emotions ran high as agents exchanged looks. "This sounds like intent," someone whispered. Meanwhile, families were unraveling. A father confronted his adult daughter in the living room, his voice shaking with rage. "You told me he was just sick," he said. "You told me it was chaos." She shot back, "That's what he told us. That's what we needed to believe." The family was left divided, with relatives choosing sides not based on facts, but on what they could emotionally survive. Fans were shocked as former defenders began deleting posts, scrubbing timelines, and refusing interviews. Silence, it seemed, had become the new strategy. Then came the bombshell interview. A former security member, face partially shadowed, sat down with investigators and finally spoke on record. He rehearsed it, the man said. Not just speeches, outcomes. When asked what he meant, he leaned forward. He ran drills. Who would say what? Who would cry? Who would deny? He told us chaos could be controlled if you planned it right. One investigator slammed the table. "So you're saying this was staged?" The man hesitated, then nodded. "Parts of it, enough to shape the story." As word of that testimony leaked, outrage exploded. Protests formed outside buildings connected to the case. Some people carried signs demanding justice, others carried signs calling the investigation a witch hunt. A heated argument broke out on live television when two commentators clashed. "You can't put this back in the box," one shouted. "You're reopening trauma," the other snapped. "Trauma doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient." Emotions ran high across the country as survivors groups released statements, some thanking investigators, others begging them to stop. Behind the scenes, the FBI followed the money. Offshore accounts linked to shell corporations told a story that contradicted decades of official explanations. This wasn't poverty, one financial analyst said. This was preparation. The revelation ignited another wave of shock. Friends turned on friends as names surfaced of people who may have benefited financially while publicly claiming ignorance. One former ally allegedly screamed during a private call, "We were told this was for the cause," before breaking down in sobs. Betrayal hung thick in every conversation. Late one evening, a confrontation took place that would later be described as explosive. Two former Inner Circle members were brought into the same room. The first pointed across the table and yelled, "You knew he was lying and you stayed." The other shot back, "We were all trapped. Don't pretend you were innocent." Voices rose. Chairs scraped. An agent had to step in as one of them shouted, "He said if we broke ranks, everything would burn." The room fell silent. That word echoed. Burn. As the investigation widened, a previously unknown recording surfaced, this one clearer than the rest. Jim Jones' voice, steady and deliberate, discussed legal outcomes and narrative control. When the tape ended, one attorney whispered, "This is motive." Another replied, "This is premeditation." The implications were devastating. Legal analysts began openly saying what had once been unthinkable. This evidence could support charges equivalent to life in prison if you were alive. That phrase spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and conversations alike. Families of victims gathered privately, some for the first time in years. Tears flowed freely. One mother said, "I don't want revenge. I want truth." Another snapped back, "Truth without accountability is nothing." Emotions ran high as they debated whether this investigation would bring closure or only deepen the wounds. Outside, fans argued online, friendships collapsing over opposing views. "You're erasing our pain," one post read. Another replied, "You're protecting a lie." And still, the agents kept pushing. One of them looked at a wall covered in photos, strings connecting faces and dates, and said quietly, "This isn't ending where people think it is." The sense of dread grew heavier by the hour. Because with every document uncovered and every witness cracked, it became clearer that the story wasn't just about the past. It was about how many people had helped keep it buried, and how far they might go now that the truth was clawing its way back into the light. The pressure reached a breaking point when a sealed memo leaked overnight, sending shockwaves through every corner of the investigation. Agents arrived early, faces tight, coffee untouched, because the memo didn't just summarize evidence, it named names. Not just followers, not just aides, but professionals, lawyers, donors, and intermediaries who had quietly benefited while the public story painted chaos and madness. One agent exhaled slowly and said, "This explains the protection." Another replied, "This explains the silence." Emotions ran high as they realized how deep the network went. Across the country, doors were closing and phones were being thrown away. A former financial advisor allegedly tried to flee, only to be stopped for questioning hours later. "I was told it was humanitarian," he insisted, sweat pooling at his collar. "I never asked where the money came from." An investigator shot back, "You didn't ask where it went either." The exchange grew heated as documents were placed in front of him, signatures circled in red. His voice dropped to a whisper. "We were told loyalty would be rewarded." The family was left divided when his brother later appeared on television, saying, "He's being used as a scapegoat." Inside another interrogation room, a longtime defender finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she shouted, "He said the world needed a villain so the rest of us could survive." When asked who else knew, she shook her head violently. Everyone knew something. No one knew everything. That line would later dominate headlines, fans shocked by how casually it explained decades of denial. Emotions ran high online as supporters and critics clashed, accusing each other of rewriting history. Then came the testimony no one expected. A former legal consultant, calm and precise, laid out a timeline that stunned even seasoned investigators. There were contingency plans, he said. For arrest, for exposure, for legacy. He described mock trials, rehearsed statements, and pre-written narratives designed to activate if things went wrong. He understood optics, the consultant said. He understood sympathy. An agent leaned back in disbelief. "You're saying this was insurance?" The man nodded. "Against accountability." Families of victims were notified before the next wave of leaks. Some collapsed into tears. Others reacted with fury. One son slammed his fist on the table and yelled, "So they let him become a myth instead of a criminal?" His aunt replied quietly, "Because myths don't stand trial." The family was left divided, torn between wanting the full truth and fearing what it would cost to expose it all. Emotions ran high as support groups split into opposing camps, some demanding prosecution of anyone still alive, others begging for an end to the pain. Media coverage intensified, with reenactments, expert panels, and endless speculation. One commentator said, "This reframes everything." Another warned, "This could implicate institutions, not just individuals." Behind the scenes, agents confirmed that several organizations were now under review for obstruction and facilitation. A tense meeting erupted when one official argued, "We can't prosecute ghosts." An agent snapped back, "But we can prosecute the people who protected them." A dramatic confrontation unfolded when two former insiders crossed paths outside a courthouse. Cameras caught every second. "You lied," one shouted. "You helped him." The other fired back, "We all helped him by staying silent." Security intervened as the argument escalated, both of them crying, both of them shaking. Fans were shocked by the rawness of the moment, the realization that this wasn't ideology anymore, it was guilt. Deep in the evidence vault, analysts pieced together the final financial trail. What they found suggested long-term planning that extended far beyond the moment history remembered. Trusts, properties, and coded transfers painted a picture of control continuing even after death. This was about legacy, one analyst said. About shaping how he'd be remembered, another added, or not remembered as a criminal. Emotions ran high as the implications sank in. If proven, the case wouldn't just redefine one man, it would expose how systems can be manipulated when fear and devotion intersect. A late-night briefing brought everything into focus. An agent stood before a board filled with photos, dates, and arrows and said, "If you were alive, this would be life." The room was silent. No one needed clarification. Life in prison. The words carried weight, not just legally, but symbolically. It meant the narrative of madness could no longer hide calculated intent. It meant the truth had teeth. Outside, rain poured as reporters waited for statements that didn't come. Inside, one investigator looked at the files and whispered, "People are going to hate us for this." Another replied, "They already do." Emotions ran high as they prepared for backlash, lawsuits, and public outrage. Because the deeper they went, the clearer it became that this story wasn't ending with revelations. It was heading toward reckoning. As dawn approached, a final piece of evidence was queued for review, one that insiders claimed would change the temperature of the room. No one spoke as it loaded. The sense of dread was overwhelming. Because if what they suspected was true, the next revelation wouldn't just expose complicity. It would force the world to confront how easily truth can be buried, and how many people helped hold the shovel. The final evidence didn't arrive with sirens or drama, it arrived quietly, slipped into the system under a bland file name that almost disguised its weight. But once it began playing, everything changed. The room seemed to shrink as the audio filled the air, Jim Jones speaking with eerie clarity, not ranting, not shouting, but calculating. If the narrative fractures, the voice said, you guide it back. Confusion is a tool, guilt is a leash. No one spoke. One agent rubbed his temples and whispered, this is control. Emotions ran high as the recording continued, outlining steps, reactions, and outcomes as if human lives were chess pieces. By mid-morning, word of the recording leaked. Fans were shocked all over again, some refusing to believe it was real, others saying it finally confirmed what they'd always felt but were afraid to say out loud. One longtime supporter posted, this feels like betrayal layered on betrayal. Another replied, it feels like the truth finally breathing. Arguments exploded across platforms. Friendships ended in comment sections. Families were left divided as old wounds reopened and new accusations flew. Inside a cramped interview room, a woman who had avoided the spotlight for decades finally agreed to speak. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. He told me love was obedience, she said softly. When asked why she followed him, her answer broke the room. Because he made fear feel like safety. The agent across from her nodded slowly. And now? She exhaled. Now I feel like I've been protecting my captor. Emotions ran high as her testimony joined a growing pile of voices, each one peeling back another layer of myth. A surprise development stunned investigators when a retired official requested immunity in exchange for cooperation. I can't carry this anymore, he said during a late-night call. He admitted to helping suppress early reports, claiming he was pressured to maintain social stability. An agent snapped, by letting a lie become history, the man's voice cracked. I thought I was preventing chaos. The family was left divided when his children learned of his role, one defending him publicly, another refusing to speak to him at all. As the investigation neared its peak, a closed-door meeting brought together prosecutors, historians, and psychologists. The debate was heated. This was coercion, one argued. Another shot back, this was orchestration. Emotions ran high as they weighed intent versus impact, madness versus method. Finally, one prosecutor said what everyone was thinking. If you were alive, this meets the threshold. Someone asked quietly, for what? The answer came without hesitation. Life. The word hung in the air like a verdict already delivered. Not just life in prison, but life stripped of myth, stripped of excuses. Outside that room, reporters sensed the shift. Speculation turned into certainty. Headlines grew bolder. Supporters grew quieter. Critics grew louder. A former aide confronted another in a hallway, cameras catching every second. You knew, she hissed. He shook his head. I knew enough to be afraid. She snapped back, fear doesn't erase responsibility. Emotions ran high as security pulled them apart. Families of victims gathered again, this time with more resolve than uncertainty. One man stood and said, they can't punish him, but they can stop protecting the lie. Nods followed, tears followed. The family was left divided no longer by whether the truth should come out, but by how much they could personally bear to hear. Some wanted every detail exposed. Others asked for mercy, not for him, but for themselves. As night fell, agents prepared the final briefing. One of them stared at the evidence wall and said, this isn't about rewriting history. Another replied, it's about telling it without fear. Emotions ran high as they anticipated backlash, denial, and outrage. Because even now, some would cling to the myth. Some always would. The last scene of the day unfolded quietly. An investigator shut off the lights, paused, and looked back at the files. He built a story to outlive him, she said softly. Her partner answered, and now that story is on trial. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware that a reckoning decades in the making had finally reached its edge. The truth was no longer buried. It was standing in the open, daring the world to look away. The fallout began before any official statement was made, because fear travels faster than facts. Former allies started distancing themselves in public while privately scrambling to protect what remained of their reputations. One high-profile supporter canceled an interview minutes before going live, issuing a vague statement about mental health and historical complexity. Fans were shocked, reading between the lines, sensing retreat. Emotions ran high as silence replaced certainty. Behind the scenes, attorneys held emergency calls, voices overlapping, everyone asking the same question in different ways. How exposed are we? Inside a federal building, a strategy meeting spiraled into argument. We release everything, one agent insisted. We let the public see it all. Another pushed back. And trigger mass denial? Riots? Copycat devotion? The room split. A psychologist warned, belief systems don't collapse quietly. A prosecutor replied, neither does justice. The tension was suffocating. No one wanted to be responsible for lighting the match, but no one could deny the fire was already burning. A former inner circle figure attempted to control the narrative with a surprise press conference. Cameras flashed as he stepped up, pale and rigid. Jim Jones was a sick man, he declared. Nothing more. But when reporters pressed him about the recordings, the documents, the financial trails, his composure cracked. I didn't know everything, he snapped. None of us did, a reporter shouted back, but you knew enough. The silence that followed was deafening. Fans were shocked by how quickly confidence dissolved into defensiveness. That night, a private confrontation unfolded between two siblings whose parents had been devoted followers. "If this is true," the sister said, voice trembling, "then our childhood was a lie." Her brother slammed his hand against the wall. "Don't do this," he pleaded. "I can't survive that thought." The family was left divided, not by facts, but by what each could emotionally endure. Emotions ran high as the realization settled that truth doesn't heal everyone the same way. Agents received another unexpected call just after midnight. A woman spoke softly, urgently. "There's something else," she said. She revealed the existence of a handwritten journal, hidden for decades, detailing post-event instructions meant to activate years later. "He called it the Echo," she said. When the journal was recovered, its contents stunned everyone. References to anniversaries, media cycles, and renewed devotion through controversy. One agent whispered, "He anticipated this." Another replied, "He engineered it." The journal's existence reframed everything. What had seemed like resurfaced history now looked like a delayed reaction, planned long ago. Emotions ran high as analysts debated whether releasing this would validate his desire for attention or finally dismantle it. A senior investigator made the call. "We don't protect lies because we're afraid of them." The decision set off a chain reaction. When excerpts leaked, the public response was volcanic. Protests intensified, vigils formed, some people burned old memorabilia in the streets. Others clutched it tighter than ever. Fans were shocked by the extremity on both sides. Online, one post went viral, "If your faith can't survive truth, what was it built on?" The comment section exploded. A former propagandist broke down during a recorded interview, sobbing uncontrollably. "We were told we were saving people," she cried. "We were just saving a story." When asked who wrote that story, she didn't hesitate. "He did." Emotions ran high as her words spread, stripping away the last remnants of accidental chaos and replacing them with deliberate design. The legal ramifications expanded rapidly. While Jim Jones himself could never stand trial, prosecutors outlined potential charges for living participants: obstruction, fraud, coercion, conspiracy. The phrase, "equivalent to life," dominated analysis, a symbolic verdict that reframed the past. One analyst said on air, "This isn't about punishing the dead. It's about ending immunity for belief-driven harm." Fans were shocked by how many respected names suddenly went quiet. A heated argument erupted during a closed survivors meeting. "This investigation is reopening wounds," one man yelled. Another stood up and shouted back, "The wound never closed. It was just covered." Emotions ran high as people realized closure had been a myth sold to them to keep peace. The family was left divided again, but this time, the division felt temporary, fragile, as if something new was trying to form beneath the anger. In the final hours before a major briefing, an agent stared at a photo pinned to the wall and said quietly, "He didn't just want devotion. He wanted endurance." Her partner nodded. "And that's why this hurts so much. Because endurance meant generations carrying confusion, guilt, and silence." As dawn broke, officials prepared to speak, knowing whatever they said would never be enough. Outside, crowds gathered, some chanting for justice, others for restraint. Emotions ran high as the world braced for words that couldn't undo the past but might finally stop it from repeating. And somewhere in the noise, one truth became unavoidable. This wasn't just a story about a man. It was a story about how easily control can disguise itself as care, how fear can masquerade as faith, and how long a lie can live when too many people benefit from keeping it alive. The briefing finally went public, and the moment the spokesperson stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere outside shifted from anticipation to confrontation. Questions were shouted before he could even speak. "Are you saying this was intentional? Who helped him? Why should we believe this now?" The spokesperson raised his hands, asking for calm, but calm was gone. Emotions ran high as he confirmed what had been circulating in fragments for days. The investigation had uncovered evidence of long-term planning, narrative manipulation, and active protection by multiple parties. The words landed heavy. Fans were shocked not just by what was said, but by what was implied. Within hours, reactions poured in from every direction. Former allies released carefully worded statements denying knowledge while condemning any proven wrongdoing. Critics tore those statements apart line by line. "This is cowardice," one survivor said during a livestream. "They're apologizing without admitting anything." The family was left divided again as some relatives begged loved ones to stay quiet, fearing retaliation, while others felt silence was no longer an option. "If we don't speak now," one woman said through tears, "then we're still following his rules." Behind the scenes, investigators braced for impact. Lawsuits were threatened. Political pressure mounted. One official warned, this could destabilize communities that never healed. An agent shot back, they never healed because they were never told the truth. The argument grew heated, reflecting a larger conflict playing out nationwide. Was truth worth the chaos it might cause? Emotions ran high because no one could answer that without choosing a side. A dramatic twist emerged when a respected historian publicly reversed decades of work. In an emotional interview, he admitted, "I ignored evidence because it didn't fit the narrative I'd already published." His voice shook as he added, "I thought I was protecting victims from more pain." Critics accused him of complicity. Supporters praised his honesty. Fans were shocked by how fragile authority suddenly looked. If experts could be wrong, what else had been built on shaky ground? Late that night, a private call between two former insiders was leaked. "We should have burned everything," one said bitterly. The other replied, "He told us not to. He said someday it would protect us." That line spread rapidly, igniting fury. Protect us? From what? Accountability? Guilt? The realization that even destruction had been controlled added another layer of horror. Emotions ran high as people grappled with how thoroughly manipulation had permeated every choice. Survivors gathered again, this time inviting media. One by one, they spoke. "I stayed because I was afraid," said one. "I stayed because I believed," said another. "I stayed because leaving meant losing everyone," said a third. Together, their voices formed a picture far more complex than madness. Coercion, loyalty, fear, love weaponized. The family was left divided not by denial now, but by grief moving at different speeds. As night fell, a legal analyst went viral for a single sentence. "If intent is proven, death does not erase culpability." The phrase life echoed again across screens, not as a sentence to be served, but as a measure of severity. A symbolic verdict. Fans were shocked by how powerfully a hypothetical could reshape reality. It wasn't about punishing the dead. It was about removing the shield that death had provided. Inside a quiet office, an investigator packed away files, pausing over a photograph. "He thought time would save him," she said softly. Her partner replied, "Time exposed him." Emotions ran high as they reflected on years of work leading to this moment, knowing the backlash would be fierce. But also knowing silence had already cost too much. The next morning, protests and vigils blurred together. Some people demanded arrests, others demanded peace. Signs read, "Truth is not violence," and "Stop reopening wounds." Arguments broke out in the streets. Friendships ended in real time. Fans were shocked by how personal it all felt, as if history had stepped into the present and refused to leave. A final unexpected revelation surfaced when a previously sealed video was authenticated. In it, Jim Jones spoke directly to future viewers. "They will come for the story," he said calmly. "Make sure the story comes first." The clip ended abruptly. No rant, no chaos, just instruction. Emotions ran high as people realized this moment had been anticipated, even welcomed. The anger that followed was volcanic. In response, a coalition of survivors announced a truth archive, vowing to release unfiltered testimony regardless of discomfort. "We're done being managed," one spokesperson said. "This is ours now." The family was left divided again, but something had changed. Division no longer felt like paralysis. It felt like movement. As commentators debated whether the world was better or worse for knowing, one quiet realization settled in. Control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like care. Sometimes it looks like protection. And sometimes it lasts because people mistake silence for healing. The story didn't end with a verdict, because there was none to deliver. It ended with a question hanging in the air, unanswered and unavoidable. How many truths are still buried, not because they are forgotten, but because remembering them would demand change? And as the cameras slowly powered down and the crowds thinned, one thing became clear. This reckoning wasn't about the past alone. It was about what happens next, now that the lie had finally lost its grip. The aftermath didn't cool anything down, it intensified it. Once the cameras left and the statements were issued, the real damage began in private. Former insiders turned on each other in whispers and late-night calls, each conversation heavier than the last. One man paced his living room, phone pressed to his ear, hissing, "They're saying you signed off on it." The voice on the other end snapped back, "You told me it was approved from the top." The call ended abruptly, another relationship shattered. Emotions ran high because blame had finally found oxygen. Inside survivor circles, a strange shift took place. For years, people had bonded over shared trauma, but now fractures appeared. Some felt validated, energized by the truth finally surfacing. Others felt overwhelmed, destabilized. "I built my healing on a version of events," one woman admitted during a closed meeting. "If that version is gone, what do I stand on now?" No one answered her. The family was left divided again, not between right and wrong, but between readiness and exhaustion. Legal pressure mounted quickly. Subpoenas turned into depositions. Depositions turned into quiet settlements. A former fundraiser was confronted with evidence during questioning and broke down. "We were told the money would keep us safe," she sobbed. "Safe from who?" an investigator asked. She stared at the table. "From the truth." That exchange leaked within hours, igniting outrage. Fans were shocked by how often the word safe appeared in stories that ended in harm. A dramatic twist emerged when a private foundation announced it would return funds linked to the movement. The statement was brief, carefully worded, but the message was clear. Distance. Damage control. Critics called it too little, too late. Supporters called it responsible. Emotions ran high as analysts debated whether accountability without consequence was just another form of silence. Then came the split that no one had predicted. Two prominent survivor advocates publicly disagreed on the investigation's direction. "This is becoming spectacle," one warned. "Pain is being monetized again." The other fired back, "Silence is how we got here." Their argument played out across interviews and posts, dragging supporters into opposing camps. The family was left divided not by loyalty to the past, but by fear of repeating it. Late one night, an investigator received an anonymous package. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a note that read, "He said this would matter someday." When the file was opened, it revealed video footage never meant to be seen. Jim Jones, seated calmly, discussing optics, timing, and acceptable losses. No shouting, no frenzy, just cold clarity. One agent whispered, "This kills the insanity defense." Another replied, "This kills the myth." Emotions ran high as they realized the implications were irreversible. The leak of that footage was seismic. People who had defended him for decades went silent overnight. Others lashed out violently online, accusing the FBI of fabrication. "This is propaganda," one post screamed. "This is manufactured," but experts confirmed the authenticity, frame by frame. Fans were shocked by how denial shifted from certainty to desperation. Families felt the impact immediately. A grandmother refused to watch the footage, covering her ears when it played on the news. "I can't lose him again," she said. Her grandson replied quietly, "We lost the truth first." The family was left divided, grief clashing with clarity, love colliding with reality. As days passed, institutions once considered untouchable came under scrutiny. Why were early warnings dismissed? Why were reports buried? Why did so many people look away? Hearings were proposed, committees formed, statements were revised. Emotions ran high as the question expanded beyond one man to an entire system that had enabled him. This wasn't a failure of one leader, one analyst said. It was a failure of safeguards. A heated exchange erupted during a televised panel when a former official tried to minimize his role. "We didn't have the information," he claimed. A survivor snapped back, "We did, and no one listened." Applause erupted. Fans were shocked by how raw the confrontation became, how the distance between authority and lived experience collapsed in real time. Behind the scenes, prosecutors weighed their options. While no trial could put Jim Jones behind bars, charges against living participants were becoming inevitable. Conspiracy, fraud, coercion, obstruction, each word carried weight. One prosecutor said quietly, "This is how you dismantle a legacy." Emotions ran high because for the first time, consequences felt tangible. A surprise reconciliation occurred when two estranged siblings appeared together at a vigil. They didn't speak to the press. They just stood side by side, candles flickering. Later, one of them said, "We don't agree on everything. But we agree the lie ends here." The family was left divided still, but less broken. Something fragile but real was forming. As the investigation entered its final phase, fatigue set in. Truth is heavy, and carrying it day after day takes a toll. One agent admitted, "Some nights I wish I didn't know this much." Another replied, "Me too. But knowing means it can't happen again the same way." Emotions ran high because the cost of awareness was clear, but so was the cost of ignorance. In the background, media attention began to shift, as it always does. News stories competed for airtime. Outrage cycles shortened, but among those closest to the truth, there was no moving on yet. Too much had been uncovered. Too many questions remained unanswered. The story refused to fade quietly because it wasn't just history anymore. It was a mirror. And as one survivor said during a final closed meeting of the week, her voice steady despite everything, "This isn't about destroying a memory. It's about stopping it from controlling us." The room stayed silent after that, not in fear, but in recognition. Because for the first time, the narrative was no longer being managed. It was being owned. The closing stretch of the investigation felt less like an ending and more like standing at the edge of something irreversible. Every new disclosure shifted relationships, identities, and beliefs that had been cemented for decades. Former insiders who once moved in lockstep now avoided each other entirely, afraid that even a shared glance could be interpreted as conspiracy. One man was overheard saying, "He taught us how to disappear in plain sight," and that sentence alone captured the mood. Emotions ran high because disappearing was no longer an option. Survivor communities entered a strange phase of reckoning. Some people who had never spoken publicly before now felt compelled to share everything, while others withdrew completely, overwhelmed by the relentless exposure. "I survived by not remembering," one woman said during a support call. "Now remembering is everywhere." Another responded, "Forgetting is what kept him powerful." The tension between healing and truth became impossible to separate. The family was left divided again, but this time the divide wasn't loud. It was quiet, internal, and heavy. A dramatic turn came when a major media outlet admitted to editorial failures tied to early reporting. In a rare on-air apology, an anchor said, "We accepted simplified explanations because they were easier to broadcast." The admission sent shockwaves through journalism circles. Fans were shocked to see institutions acknowledging their role in maintaining a false narrative. Critics demanded more accountability. Others said the apology didn't go far enough. Emotions ran high as people realized how many layers of protection had existed, not through malice alone, but convenience. Behind closed doors, prosecutors finalized a series of indictments against living figures connected to financial and logistical support. While names were temporarily sealed, the scope was clear. This wasn't symbolic, this was actionable. One legal expert said quietly, "This is the closest you'll get to a life sentence without the defendant." The phrase circulated widely, heavy with meaning. Not a punishment for the dead, but a declaration that intent had been proven. Families of the accused reacted with predictable chaos. Some stood by their loved ones publicly, insisting they were victims too. Others cut ties completely. A daughter confronted her father during a recorded visitation. "You said it was charity," she cried. "You said it was about helping people." He stared at the floor and whispered, "That's what I needed it to be." The family was left divided not by ideology, but by trust shattered beyond repair. Another unexpected revelation surfaced when an archivist discovered correspondence between Jones and external advisors discussing public sentiment years in advance. The language was chillingly modern. Outrage cycles, media fatigue, sympathy windows. One analyst shook his head and said, "This reads like a playbook." Emotions ran high as experts concluded that manipulation had extended far beyond a single community, exploiting human psychology on a massive scale. Public opinion fractured further. Some people argued the investigation had gone too far, that continuing to dig only prolonged suffering. Others insisted stopping now would be the final betrayal. Protests reflected that divide, with opposing groups sometimes occupying the same space, shouting past each other. "Let the dead rest," one side chanted. "Truth is not rest," the other responded. Fans were shocked by how personal it all felt, as if everyone had a stake whether they wanted one or not. In a quiet moment away from cameras, a senior investigator admitted exhaustion. "We're dismantling something people built their lives around," she said. "That doesn't happen cleanly." Her colleague nodded, "But leaving it intact would be worse." Emotions ran high because no one involved could claim moral simplicity anymore. Every choice carried consequence. A final round of survivor testimony was released through the New Truth Archive. There was no commentary, no narration, just voices. Trembling, steady, angry, broken, resilient. One man said, "I thought obedience was love." Another said, "I confused fear with purpose." The rawness stunned viewers. Fans were shocked not by the content, but by the absence of sensationalism. This wasn't spectacle, it was reckoning. The archive sparked a wave of private conversations. Families talked late into the night. Siblings compared memories. Parents apologized for choices they once defended. "I didn't know how to leave," one mother told her son. He replied, "You left now." The family was left divided still, but moments like that hinted at repair. Slow, imperfect, real. Legal proceedings moved forward methodically. Court dates were set. Evidence lists grew. Defense attorneys argued coercion and fear. Prosecutors countered with documentation of planning and benefit. "Victimhood does not erase responsibility," one filing read. Emotions ran high as the line between manipulation and accountability was tested in real time. Media attention began to thin, as it always does, but something fundamental had changed. The story no longer depended on headlines. It lived in archives, in courtrooms, in families finally telling the truth to themselves. One survivor said during a small gathering, "He doesn't control this anymore." The statement was met with silence, then nods. A final symbolic moment occurred when a former communal property was converted into a memorial and education center. There was no grand opening, just a quiet walk through. Photographs, timelines, unfiltered documents. One visitor whispered, "This is heavier than I expected." Another replied, "Because it's honest." Emotions ran high, but there was also relief. Honesty, even when painful, had weight but also grounding. As months passed, the language around the story shifted. Words like cult and madness were replaced with coercion, intent, and complicity. Experts debated definitions. Survivors debated feelings. Families debated futures. The family was left divided still, but division no longer meant silence. It meant conversation, even when it hurt. In one of the last recorded interviews related to the case, an investigator was asked if any of this brought closure. She paused for a long time before answering. "Closure is a myth," she said finally. "But accountability isn't." Emotions ran high because that distinction mattered. Closure suggests an end. Accountability suggests responsibility moving forward. The legacy that Jim Jones tried so carefully to engineer had not survived intact. It had been dissected, challenged, and exposed to light he could never control. Not erased, but transformed. Stripped of mystery, stripped of excuses, stripped of power. And while there would never be a cell, never be a sentence formally read, the conclusion had settled in quietly but firmly. If judged by the standards of intent, planning, and harm, the verdict was unavoidable. Life, not as a punishment to be served, but as a truth to be carried. By history, by institutions, by families, by anyone willing to look at how easily control can hide behind belief, and how dangerous silence can become when it feels safer than truth. The story did not end with peace. It ended with responsibility, and that, for many, was the hardest truth of all. And now it's on you. After everything you've just heard, after every secret uncovered and every line blurred between belief and control, the question isn't what happened back then. The question is what happens now. Do you think this investigation finally exposed the truth, or do you believe there are still layers being protected in silence? Should accountability stop with revelations, or should it go further, even decades later? Fans are shocked, emotions are still running high, and the family remains divided, but your voice matters in moments like this. Stories like these don't end in courtrooms alone, they end in public memory. They end in how we choose to talk about power, loyalty, and responsibility. And they end in whether we allow history to be softened, or whether we demand it be told exactly as it was. If this evidence had come out earlier, do you think everything would have changed? Or was this reckoning always inevitable? Some say the truth came too late. Others say the truth comes when the world is finally ready to hear it. Where do you stand? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Read what others are saying. Challenge each other, respectfully. This conversation doesn't have to be comfortable, but it should be honest. If you believe stories like this deserve to be examined without fear, make sure you show your support. Hit like if you think the truth should never be buried. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into stories that refuse to stay hidden. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because silence is how these stories survive. This isn't just history, this is a warning, and what we do with it next is up to you.